Today, we'll review the three big new announcements from the top three humanoid robot companies: Tesla and their TeslaBot Optimus, Figure and their Figure 1 robot, and Optronic with Atlas. Elon Musk has just now confirmed how they will both rent and sell the bot outright. He's also made comments on how big the market will be. Brett Adcock, CEO of Figure AI, has just announced that they are now shipping a small fleet of robots to their first client. And Optronic just signed a massive partnership with a logistics company that will introduce their Atlas robot to many factories. We have Scott Walter, a two-time robotics company founder, joining us today. Welcome, Scott. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Herbert. It's nice to be back after my journeys.
Love your journeys. You always discover things. You went to see the SpaceX rocket ship and a bunch of other conferences. So during that time, every week, we always get brand new information. But I think the big one that we've got confirmation from Elon Musk about Tesla and their Tesla bot is this. This is new. He basically said now that bots will be offered both as rentals as well as to buy, but the former first. So Søren Basher, you have been doing deep kind of research and forecasting. And we all assumed that because of the high margins, it would just really just be rentals, SaaS model, robots as a service. But he's also offering to buy. What was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this pretty much confirms what we sort of thought would be the model to begin with, and a hat tip to CERN, because that was more of a follow-up from some of the statements Elon made at the shareholder meeting last week, where CERN kind of called Elon out and said, wait a minute, he's not being optimistic enough. His numbers are not nutty enough. They should be a little bit higher. And he actually got a little bit of response from Elon. And one of those was how it was going to be sold. We've always felt that it made sense to rent it at first or make it like robot as a service. And eventually you would probably get to the phase where you would start to sell it. And more or less kind of confirm that that's the business model that they will be doing. At first, they will be doing it as a rental. And then, of course, long-term, you can either rent it, maybe hourly, daily, something like that, or just purchase it outright. So that makes sense financially to do a model like that. The other thing that Elon confirmed in the shareholder meeting is that, eventually he can see at scale them being able to get the price of the bot down to around $10,000 to produce, and then probably to be able to sell somewhere around $20,000 when you do that sales model. And that means if you're thinking of selling it for about $20,000, then your rental model might be close to that. It's definitely worth a lot more than that. And we've talked about it before. It's worth about $100,000 a year leasing. And so if you're able to rent it for like $20,000 a year or something like that, if you're thinking of selling it, or say for $10,000 a year, that's a bargain. So, but that's going to be more long-term. So I think, initially it's going to be going more into factories and people that are be using it to, produce goods and services would be using that more likely than going into the household. However, Elon has mentioned numerous times that he's talking about it being useful around the house. So they're thinking about that. I just don't know what that time frame is, whether it's sort of more of a long-term time frame, and they just want to make sure that the bot they're coming up with is configured so that it will be able to do operations like that. And that would explain why they might want to have a bit more dexterity in the hand, because they're looking at applications that are outside the factory where it might become a bit more useful. So they definitely want to make sure they don't have to keep on redesigning the bot every 6 months because they've got different use cases. They would like to be able to make sure they get it pretty close to right the first time. You're always going to have to change it. You can never get it exactly right the first time, but you're trying to get it as close as possible.
Okay. Actually, I don't think I spoke to you since the annual shareholder meeting that came out, and they actually confirmed 1,000 to 2,000 robots next year. That's how much Tesla is going to do. What was your reaction to that statement?
Okay. And so he was talking about in the factory.
Yeah.
So he said that we'll probably be about 1,000 in the factory right now. And so right now there's two that we're aware of, that we were told about, and it's pretty much on the battery line. And then I think right after that, Julian Eberts mentioned that, like, how soon before do you think we'll have 10 in the factory? So I have a feeling, I'm just waiting to look at a post today or something like that they're really close to doing that, because it must mean they either have already 10 bots that they're just getting ready to deploy, and they probably identified at least those locations. So I think pretty soon they'll have at least 10. And if they're talking about sometime next year having 1,000 in the factory, then that means they're probably identifying a lot of it, and they see that the scale is going to be there. And so the number of bots they produce could be a lot higher than that. Now, let's think about this for a second, Herbert. What does 1,000 bots in the factory actually mean?
What do you mean? What does it actually mean?
I mean, think about it from the standpoint. This is something that CERN's talked about it repeatedly. How much
Margins?
is a human is it worth? How much is one bot worth as far as labor?
Okay. Right.
Like
Okay.
2.5 humans, right?
Yeah. And
So
each human could be 100, 200 grand minimum, right? It's more than that.
right. Now, assuming that the bots at the stage that can do like a 1-to-1 replacement, it's not one of those things that, you
Right.
need 2 bots to do the job of 1 human. But if it's 1-to-1, then you're looking at that being like, whoa, that's not really 1,000 bots in the factory. It's more like
3,000.
2,500 bots.
Yeah.
And you've got to start thinking about that when you start thinking about margins and everything else and the cost savings that would go along with
Good
that.
point. That's a very good point. Anything else that you heard in the annual shareholder meeting that was shocking to you or interesting?
Well, I think, the interesting thing that we got was regarding, again, the 22-degree freedom hand. I've probably talked about this, many other channels, but what we can get it out right now is that we know it was going to do 25 degrees of freedom.
No.
And we didn't know the kind of movement we were going to get in the hand. So right now it can only do the clenching. And then the idea is that adding extra degrees of freedom means it would be able to move its hand on. And Elon came right out and said Optimus will be able to play the piano. So typically you mean that. Now, most people who really are good at playing the piano say you need to be able to move these fingers a bit more individually to really be able to do it. So we were curious, are they going to have the actuators for doing it? Can they move the fingers individually, or is it just going to go out like that?
Yeah.
And there was the tour for 15 lucky people got a tour with Elon and Franz of the factory. And I met a couple of them ahead of time and kind of gave them an idea, some questions. One of them and actually asked, he's like, with the 20-degree freedom hand, will it be able to do, the live long and prosper? And Elon said, no, it's not a useful gesture. It'll be able to do this at one, but it won't be able to move them individually, which you would need to do for that. And that tells us while they're adding like 4 degrees of freedom in this planar direction for the fingers, they're only adding one actuator to be able to do that. And then, of course, they're adding an extra knuckle, but with a knuckle, they're not adding an actuator. That just means that it's a bit more like a human hand. And I suspect that the fingers might be unique in length. So they won't all be the same like they are right now, but they might actually at least have the pinky be the size of the pinky. Maybe the others will be about the same size, something like that.
Yeah. You were actually correct because we did a show, maybe 2 weeks ago, a month ago, and you were saying prior to the annual shareholder meeting that there's going to be a third major revision, a third hardware robot. And you were like, for sure, the hands. But I thought maybe the hands is just a minor thing. But no, he actually said there is going to be a major hardware revision by the end of this year. And then next year, we'll have 1,000, 2,000. So that's as close as
That's when they're going to
get.
scale. So they've learned a lot from this gen, from the Gen 2, but it's still not quite what they want. So they're making the revisions. And I think it's going to be pretty big because the hand is already doing a lot. It's a telltale sign there. And I was surprised when Elon boasted about that. Was about 6 weeks ago when they dropped the video, and then suddenly goes, and there's going to be a 22-degree freedom hand. It's like, well, where'd that come from? He just wanted to get out there. And I'm sure there was more things he could have said, but it's like, I'm just going to put that out there. And people were asking him a few more questions about what was going on with the hand. And he mentioned, the actuators are going to be up here. They're going right through the whole thing. And they may be even like coming up with some new actuators, some specific designs for some of these, or some unique ones that they're realizing, hey, we could use these in some other places. So let's see. I think that bot is going to be really interesting when it comes out, which we'll probably see again in the fall. And you never know when, but it's going to be unique.
You called out right. So another, Elon's been involved every day. He will answer somebody's question, gives us a little bit more breadcrumbs, more direct answers. Here's Warren Rutledge saying there are roughly 2 billion cars on Earth. So that would be 20 billion humanoid robots. He's replying to Jensen Huang, which we'll talk about that too. Elon said, yeah, that's right. It's going to be that many. Jensen Huang was just recently interviewed as CEO of NVIDIA. And he said in that interview that he sees bots to be as common as cars. And there's going to be significant breakthroughs in robotics in the next 2 to 3 years. Elon said they'll be 10 times more common than cars. So the numbers keeps going up, right? From a billion, maybe even more and sooner. What's your thoughts on these comments?
Well, first of all, it's not just Elon saying this, all right? It's other people who know what they're talking about. And Jensen's just not going to make up numbers. There's a reason why NVIDIA is where it is because he knows how to run a company, he knows how to build a product, he knows how to deliver on that. So if he's seeing that, then we should listen to him. And, there are other people out there, Brett Adcock from Figure, Optronics, you have all these others, companies that are getting into this space. So it's not just one person that sees the market there. It's a lot of people. And the more we look at it, the likelihood of that happening makes sense. So again, when you start thinking about, well, what's the bot going to be useful for? It's more or less like when when the personal computer first came out, it was like, who needs it? It's just going to be for some business applications. No one's going to need it at home. And then people start getting it home. And then you start realizing people have like almost more than one computer at home to be able to do a bunch of things. Same thing with the mobile phone. It used to be, we had one phone in the house for everyone in the house. And now everyone in the house has their own phone. In some cases, they have two phones because they need one for business and they need one personal. So this idea that you could have more than one of these items per person is not a crazy idea. Now, it may be crazy when you start talking about the whole planet because we're talking about 8 billion people. But you can certainly see within the US and the way to look at these numbers is a bit different is remember, products have to be manufactured and made for us. So even if we don't personally own that bot, it's like we own a piece of that bot because it's helping to produce stuff for us. So there's the bots that are used to do stuff for us. And then there might be the personal bot that's actually used to help us around the house and do everything else. And it could be, it's going to start out with like one bot in the house, and then everyone's going to realize, boy, it'd really be nice to have a second one, to mind the kids when they're doing this, or maybe another one to help walk the dog and help me work around the house. It's like people are eventually going to see that it could be like one-to-one. Elon even thinks like potentially two. And I guess because didn't Luke Skywalker have two? So, and that's what he referred to, right? C-3PO and R2-D2. Yeah. So it's like, yeah.
So, I think the thing to think about is not just, okay, sure, the billions in the future, far future. What we want to know is what it's going to be now. And I think that when he said that next year we might have 1,000 robots, maybe 2,000 robots, that is much more than most people were thinking, because I think people thought that this year they have tens, next year they'll have hundreds, the following year they'll have 1,000, then 10,000, and then 100,000. That was a normal, almost every CEO we talked to, that's what they're saying. Tesla is a generation ahead. They're already talking 1,000 now, 2,000 next year. There might be another company or two, like maybe Agility might be able to do 1,000 next year as well. But this is faster.
And also, Unitree will probably be able to do it for you. I mean, they seem to also be already in the scale of 100. They could easily be in the 1,000 or thousands next year, single digit thousands, probably next year. And then after that, and again, even Suzanne Gilder, remember, she said that the scaling factor, once you get going, will probably be like 10 times a year. That will be the scale factor.
Yeah, Sanctuary.
And if you remember a few months ago, I can't remember who it was, put out like what the scaling was for Optimus.
Smoke away.
And Elon said, well, it's, not quite right, but it's close. And I remember looking at the numbers there, and already 2030 is like, wait a minute, the scaling he's got is like 2030, he had like about 1 billion there. It's like,
it's too fast.
And then Elon said, well, it's not quite. And when Elon says it's not quite, he's always like order of magnitude. And I think I divided that by 2, which meant like you'd be looking at least 1 million being produced by 2030.
Yeah.
And I think they could be on track for that. So let's look at it this way. It's kind of been a slow ramp. We were almost expecting that they would have had 100 last year. And this year it's like, we're not quite sure it's 100. So they're kind of making up for it in like one shot. And then you could imagine that, okay, from there, maybe the scale factor will be 10 or 20 or
especially
something like that.
Tesla. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next news from Figure AI. This is Brett Adcock. He says that they're shipping our first small fleet of humanoid robots to a client today. Sunday starts a large-scale AI data collection effort to train our neural nets, and robots started to do useful work. So lots to unpack there, but here's the photo.
In this case, pack.
Him packing a robot. Looks like they're going to have to separate it out. There's looks like the legs here. Maybe they take the head off or something like that, but this is one.
Hope it has enough air in there.
Sure. So let's take a look what he said. So first of all, he said small fleet of humanoid robots. Okay. So when I'm hearing that, I hear not one, not two, likely three. I'm not going to expect 4 or 5. I'm going to say 3, but you don't call 2 a fleet. What do you think?
Yeah, I would think at least 3. Small fleet, at least 3, no more than 10. So somewhere between there. More than likely on the low side, I would say.
Side.
Greater than 2.
3 to 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Then he says, starts a large-scale AI data collection effort to train our neural nets plus robots starting to do useful work. Now, when he says useful work, I don't assume that means what you mean by useful work, right? Which is like it can actually truly replace a human at this point. Same speed, same quality,
but
breaks.
Starting to do useful work. In other words, they are identifying tasks that they want to do. Yeah. They'll be getting the data collection from it with the hope or the expectation that it actually is accomplishing a real task, a real world task in this factory. The other interesting thing is, okay, you didn't mention the size of the fleet, didn't mention the client.
Yeah.
Who do you think the client is?
Oh, BMW?
I think if it was BMW, it would have mentioned it. We all know about BMW.
Oh, interesting.
So it could be another client, maybe.
Interesting.
The other thing is, let's go back and let's look at the case that it's going in. Yeah. There's a cutout in that case that it's supposed to fit in.
Yeah.
I wonder, does it look like
it's the same profile? I thought I was showing everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I had to look at it a little bit closer to see. Does that look a little different? It's hard to tell.
It looks wider, looks bigger, but I mean, who knows?
I'm looking at that hip. Does the hip look a little bit different from what we see in the other thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Right
who
here?
Knows? Right here, yeah. The hip right there. I don't know.
Hard to say. I have to look at it a little bit closer to see whether that actually matches the. Now, we've got Brett for reference there. It's I think it's at least 5'6", right? The figure bought. So does that look like it would be about 5'6"?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe, that's what I was thinking. I think the head might be cut off here or something.
Oh, the head's on the other side, right?
Oh,
he's over by Brett.
Oh, I see. I didn't.
Yeah, I can see the head in there in that profile.
I see. I didn't realize that.
I might be reading too much into it, but who knows? It might be a new version of the bot.
Okay, could be. So then he's also said this. He goes, and having an external client who will fire us if we fail will only strengthen our company. We have no choice but to produce an economically viable humanoid robot. Good. And then this is a good conversation that he had. He goes, okay, do you think that manufacturing of humanoid robots is closer to a car or is it closer to a cell phone? The conversation we just reviewed with Jensen Huang was comparing it to cars. You've heard Elon compare it to cars many times, right? But, Brett is saying, well, and a number of people have said this as well, saying that human robots are more like right in the middle, right? And he goes, I've been curious recently, are humanoid robots more similar to manufacturing a cell phone, consumer electronics, or cars? I spent a good chunk of my time now on robot manufacturing, and it seems clear that humanoid robots will resemble consumer electronics much more than cars. There are many reasons for this, but here's a few important areas. First, the mass of the robot is 25 times less than a car. You can technically pick up an entire robot. There are roughly the same number of parts in a humanoid as in a cell phone, and about 10 times fewer robot parts compared to a car. A lot of cars actually have more actuators than a robot. You can hold any single robot part in your hands, just like any cell phone part. You can't do this with cars. You need millions of square feet for fixed base robots to move sheet metal and car chassis. Figure is pushing on scale manufacturing, and we're starting to build out our lines and team. So he actually did start offering job openings for manufacturing roles now, which was something we've been waiting for. The next few years will be both exciting and challenging. What was your thoughts when you saw this?
So when Elon and Jensen have been saying it's like cars, they're talking about maybe the cost and that it's simpler to produce than a car. And if you just think about how many cars we're able to produce, we should be able to do bots. So I think they're already saying that the bot should be something easier to produce than a car. And, I agree. It's somewhere between like a cell phone and a car. The question is like right in the middle, or is it a little bit more towards a car, a little bit more towards a cell phone? And I think I would agree. It's closer to the cell phone than it is a car, but it's not exactly the same as a cell phone, since you do have the actuators, a few other things.
On
But
a
it's
plate
absolutely
in the
right as
center of the
far as the
table.
number of parts, as far as the mass, as far as the kind of manufacturing environment you need. It's much easier, and you would be able to crank it out at a much higher volume. So um, definitely more like that. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to think if maybe it's closer to almost like appliance manufacturing than cell phone.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely that way. So it's just crazy how Tesla is just so well set up for this. They've
Mhm.
got the manufacturing capabilities of, as we know, and they can crank out 1,000. They're already doing the batteries. They're doing every single part. So for companies like Figure and others, they need to show us, right, the manufacturing facilities. Now, at least they're talking about it. So I'm not sure they'll be able to do 1,000 next year. Hundreds they can probably do, but the fact that it's going out to clients now for testing. Do you think that some people say that, well, the client paid them because it's doing useful work, or more likely not quite yet doing the most useful work yet, but now I can do this as a test to gather all this AI data that he was talking about?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if there isn't something. I think the BMW contract, they were paying him like $500,000. So that was almost like just a token amount of money to cover probably travel costs, and that's about it. So it's probably the same thing, that the customer is going to put a little bit of skin in the game. That's what the expectation is, but with the realization that we're not going to commit to later parts of the contract unless you're able to prove this part. So it could be that it's a 2 or 3 part contract, and they just have to do the demonstration at the beginning. And the customers, probably very willing to help because they see an advantage there and realize that they want to be first, and that there's going to be data collection, and they're going to help as much as they can. And so they've probably definitely identified things which could be very useful. And they just have to prove that they can get to that point that the customer is convinced that, yes, this is going to save us money. And we know it can be done because remember, Agility pulled that trick off back in December. With Spanx, they were actually able to provide the robot as a labor resource and provide it at the same labor rates. And I believe it's not like Agility was losing
Yeah.
money in that deal. So
Yeah.
we know it can be done, and so I'm pretty convinced they can do it as well.
Yeah. I was just speaking to Agility, and they were saying that they confirmed that the digit bot is what they call your definition of useful work.
Hmm.
They actually said that it's already doing useful work, meaning to say that it's actually. Let me just play here just so people can see this. This one sped up a fast, so people can't see the actual
Hmm.
bot, but that it's as if you combine everything, right? The speed of the robot, the quality of the work that it does, the battery requirement, the breaks it must do, it is now what they call useful work that the client
And
is
the
very
cost of
happy, and
operation.
the cost
Yep,
of operation. So it's
that's the
worth it
important part.
to replace
Yes,
them. Yeah.
yes.
So for Figure, they need to still prove that it can do
Mhm.
useful work. But we're very, we're obviously very. They raised 675 million. They're really working hard to make this work, and it's a great company, great bot. Um, okay, so the other thing though, what happened to Figure is their CTO, longtime
Mhm.
partner, this humanoid bot, our humanoid hub, our friend there reported this that the CTO Jerry Pratt, he quit last month and is now co-founding a new humanoid robot company. We seem to be finding this. This isn't the only time that we saw a high-profile executive of a bot company or AI company split off and start their own. It's like a what's the word? Infection. Everybody's jumping, starting their
Right,
own because the
right.
market is so massive, both AI and humanoids. Pratt is a highly acclaimed researcher known for his pioneering work in bipedal locomotion. Jerry Pratt himself on LinkedIn said, "I'm happy to share that I'm starting a new position as co-founder and chief technology officer." He created his own called Persona AI, putting humanoids to work. He is now labeled here as Chief Technology Officer for Persona. He's putting together the founding team. He wants to contact him if you are interested. What's your thoughts when you saw this?
Yeah. So Jerry, I believe, came from Boston Dynamics, which is where he got the bipedal experience. So he probably gets a lot of credit for the Atlas bot there, being able to do it. And certainly that was probably some very useful experience that Figure needed to get everything set up. And it sounds like he's like you say, there's so many opportunities out there for other kind of either niche applications. And I see he's setting up in Pensacola, and it looks like he has a history in Pensacola. So it might be, it's a little bit of homesickness. It's like, okay, nice to be out there in Sunnyvale, but maybe the idea is like he'd like to set up somewhere else that's maybe a little bit closer to home for him.
Yeah. My interpretation is similar to yours. Like, of course, it could very well be a fight or something negative happen, but he's launched his own company within a month.
Yeah.
So with partners, and then this is his life work. So he probably got approached and said, let's do our own,
Yeah.
But who knows, right? We can't guess too much on that. But is another big event that happened in the robots world. The other one now is Optronic. So Optronic announced that they have a partnership with GXO Logistics, the world's largest pure play contract logistics provider to advance humanoid robotics in the logistics industry. So GXO Logistics, if I understand them correctly, they are the largest kind of provider for factories and retailers and all the big companies out there. And they provide the software and I don't know what else, but they basically support them. So when a company like a humanoid bot, not only Optronic, but Agility also partner with them, that allows GXO to introduce the bots to not only one company, but multiple. So Agility, for example, has partnered with Spanx Underwear, and they're physically in their factory doing this. So now Optronic can be introduced to that as well. Our multi-phase R&D initiative with Apollo, which is the name of their bot, aims to tackle labor-intensive tasks, improve safety, enhance efficiency. Stay tuned for updates. So this is I'm going to play the video that they shared along with that announcement. I'm going to take off the music.
Yeah, so there's the Apollo bot
yeah.
from Optronics, which we've talked about before. They are an Austin-based company. And as you mentioned earlier, that this is an agreement that they're doing with GXO. And this comes on the heels of what they also did with Mercedes-Benz. Right. And we know from the conversation we had, 2 weeks ago with Agility, that GXO is also working with Agility in the Digit bot. And they had good success with that last year. And so it tells me that GXO is very serious about the humanoid bot. And they will probably want to look at all of them. And they're probably finding that there's going to be different niche applications where they want to use it. Now, this seems to be a variation of Apollo. It's not the one that we've normally seen. What looks different?
Hands?
The hands. There's no need for fingers because the kind of application they're looking to put it in, again, something similar that also was going on with Agility of just needing very simple kind of hands. The shoulder mechanism, everything looks a little bit different, so it looks like they've been working on probably another version of Apollo for this kind of application.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can find an old version of Apollo. The problem is Apollo and Optronic is that they've been around for 3+ years. So I don't remember which one is the old one, the new one.
They've been around longer. I think they go all the way back to maybe 2015 or 2016 as a company. They worked on the Valkyrie project for NASA.
Yeah.
And have been working on these bots for a long. See, there we go. We get a full hand.
Yeah. This is the one they dropped at the NVIDIA conference like a month ago, 2 ago. I think this is their latest. And so does it look much different? I don't think so. It looks the same.
Well, you get different hands. So in this case, they have fingers. And now they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and do it without the hands. And it might be that it's a little bit slimmer on the upper arm in a way. So they may have done a little bit to reduce the mass for the particular application they're doing. So they might be saying, we don't need that many degrees of freedom. So it just looks a little bit different or tightened up a bit.
Let's take a look closer. Yeah, you're right. The
shoulder just looks different. Now, maybe it's because they don't have the covers on there, but it just looks a little bit thinner.
Love the look of this bot. So, these 3 bot companies are one of the leaders, right? It's you would consider them leaders. We follow, right? There's top 10, there's top 20. They're just coming out of the woodwork. But they're all making movements forward. You got Tesla talking about 1 to 2,000 bots. He's already talking about rental versus sales. You can already see how beautiful the Gen 2 is. He's talking about a major revision for Gen 3 by the end of this year. We're talking a few more months, then 1,000, 2,000 next year. You got Figure Robotics. People always make fun of me how I say the name Figure. I can't remember how to supposed to say it. Can you help me? Figure.
I think it's just Figure, you know.
No, they say don't call it Figure. It's Figure.
Figure. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So,
I don't know. I'm Canadian. I'm Canadian, so I don't know which is the right way to say it. Am I saying it? I think I'm probably saying it just fine. But anyways.
I think you're saying it about right.
Okay. Figure. So Figure.
I think that the company we should maybe be paying more of attention to is GXO.
Yeah. So
since this is the second time they've come up, like you've never heard of them before, and suddenly like they're dealing with two on, and I'm wondering, it's like, who is the client that Figure's saying it? If they're saying it to GXO, it's like these guys are like they're all in.
Well, I think GXO, right? If I understand correctly, they are the company that represents multiple. I've got some videos I can download while we're talking here. You know, they got multiple companies, right? They're the ones that introduce technology, software or otherwise, to these factories. That's who they are, and so it makes sense.
Yeah, and again, these companies, when they do something like that, it's because they see something. And we've heard a lot of indications that these Fortune 500 companies are very serious about the humanoid bot. They're looking at it, maybe being a bit quiet, not very public about it. But this is like the most public we've seen of a company going out there and actually not just dabbling, but really going in with two companies at this point. And it'll be interesting to see if they're also talking to the other suppliers out there just to have an idea what they're doing.
So let's, can you see my screen?
Yes. I mean, they got plenty of robots in there already. A lot of the traditional bots, the AMRs that are moving everything around like you would see in an Amazon warehouse. So they know a lot about logistics, and they realize that's just one more piece to the puzzle.
Yeah. So smarter logistics, they help companies with automation. There you go, Scott. There you go. I mean, they supply all this, right? So why wouldn't they be doing? Yeah, why wouldn't they be doing
everything?
Warehousing. They provide the what they call those AMRs, which is the mobile robots, the industrial robots, these kind of conveyor belts,
moving boxes around, So they set these things up, and that's like a big logistics company. And again, a lot of these companies are not household names, but they affect everything in your household.
So why wouldn't they be partnering with as many humanoid robots? If they work.
Look how many different traditional robots are out there as well. I mean, I saw an ABB, I saw a KUKA, I saw a universal robot there as well. So they want to work with all of them. You
know who they should be working with, Scott? You and me. Human bots. So you and I have created a company called Human Bots with Scott Walter and Søren Basher as well. And we've got software that simulates everything you saw there. Before a customer buys it, we can actually show you the industrial robots, the mobile robots, the humanoid robots, and the humans all working in real time, the real physics. We can map out exactly what they will need, and we'll integrate that information from the humanoid bots and the other bots all into one unified reporting. And then we integrate that to any software that any retail or company might have, business operations, deep integration to their HR, to the inventory, supply chain software, whatever it is that they need to see. That's who we should be talking to, GXO. Yeah?
I think so.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Appreciate your time here. With lots of advancements in these three top companies. We'll continue doing this as we follow advancements. Follow Scott on X at Going Ballistic 5. He writes a lot about SpaceX, but a lot of bots. He has become the expert in humanoid bots. Thank you, Scott. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Herbert.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.